over 800 Division I players transferred last year. Teach them how to quit. That's what we're doing.
How many stops have you made, Tubby? Everything is rigged for the coaches.
Why should the kid be penalized when the coach gets it to enrich himself?
Cavaliers forward Kevin Love is opening up about his mental health. Love wrote that he suffered a panic attack.
A lot of people ashamed to talk about it.
It's empowering to yourself when you openly are able to talk about the scars that you have.
Got him again, and it's a touchdown. Perfect throw to Listenby.
The former football player suing the school for forcing him to play through injury.
I guess I was a little bit hurt.
What you've seen may change your perception of any sporting event. Get this, shoot this.
Welcome to Outside the Lines. I'm Bob Lee, and ahead today, what Tubby Smith has begun with the Q word, and he is not quitting. But our big story today, this Tuesday in Studio Z, is a sensitive one. Kevin Love and his frank and personal account today of his battles with panic attacks. Now, this is a trying season for Love and for the Cleveland Cavaliers. He is currently out, having missed 14 games to this date with a hand fracture that came to light 5 weeks ago. But even a week before that, Love was reported to be the focus of a heated Cavaliers players team meeting, with some players believing Love had faked an illness to leave a now infamous blowout loss to the Thunder. Having played only 3 minutes, Love left that game after 3 minutes complaining of dizziness. Now, 2.5 weeks before that, he missed a shoot-around during the day, and his status for that night's game with the Blazers was in question all day long. Love did play that night. And today, in a first-person piece of the Players Tribune, Love discusses his struggles with panic attacks, his ongoing therapy, and how he says this all came to a head early in the NBA season, November 5 against the Atlanta Hawks, how the Cavs' early season struggles and his own mental issue manifested itself during a second-half timeout. When I got to the bench, I felt my heart racing faster than usual. Then I was having trouble catching my breath. It's hard to describe, but everything was spinning, like my brain was trying to climb out of my head. The air felt thick and heavy. My mouth was like chalk. I remember our assistant coach yelling something about a defensive set. I nodded, but I did not hear much of what he said. By that point, I was freaking out. When I got up to walk out of the huddle, I knew I couldn't re-enter the game, like literally couldn't do it physically. I blurted something like, "I'll be right back," and I ran back to the locker room. I was running from room to room like I was looking for something I couldn't find. Really, I was just hoping that my heart would stop racing. It was like my body was trying to say to me, "You're about to die." I ended up on the floor in the training room, lying on my back, trying to get enough air to breathe. That was November in this trying season in many regards for Kevin Love. Dave McMenamin travels with the Cavs. He's around them all the time. He's been watching this team throughout, and Dave joins us. Before we get to reaction, I want to ask you deal with this gentleman all the time. When you read this today, how did it square with your observations of what you've seen both this year and in the past?
Well, Bob, was interesting. In his piece, he mentioned that one of the first concerns he had after the initial panic attack wasn't his mental health or his physical health. It was what would happen if people found out. And he mentioned a relief that he felt when no one wrote about it. Now, this is something that myself and other people covering the team have heard rumblings about really for months now. And it's the type of deal where, my own personal experience, there's some history of mental illness in my family. It's not something where you really want to be the guy breaking that story. It's something that story belongs to the individual. And certainly him speaking his truth, sharing his story, allowing the world in on what it's like to, walk a day in his shoes, I think ultimately can help a lot of people.
Well, bravo for your sensitivity and appreciation of that. And of course, you say the Cavaliers, the next two sentences or two syllables out of your mouth are LeBron. And LeBron read this morning, obviously knew something of it from being on the inside as the emotional leader of this team, and tweeted his support. What does that represent?
I think it represents a deep bond that it's going to be hard to ever quite put your finger on what the true relationship is between Kevin and LeBron, because they had some really bright moments and they've had some dark ones as well. But certainly there's a professional respect that exists there. And I think they've both gotten a lot out of one another by showing one another that you don't have to have the exact same approach. And that's what it's like to grow as an individual, grow as a professional. grow as a human being. And obviously in Kevin's time of need now, him opening up himself to the world, I'm sure it's comforting for him to have someone like LeBron say, hey, man, I got your back when you go through this.
Let's go back to that infamous team meeting, third week of January following the blowout. A lot of things were on the table. Was that the moment? Did he put this on the table in front of his teammates in so many words?
It was, because he experienced another panic attack in the Oklahoma City game. So he left that game early. He went back to the locker room, left the arena early, missed the following practice on a Sunday. And then before practice started on Monday, Isaiah Thomas and Dwayne Wade were like, hey, we're not going to start things before we know what's going on with Kevin. And Kevin used that opportunity to kind of let people in. Now, I think perhaps had he let people in earlier, they wouldn't have come to an explosive team meeting. But again, as Kevin shared in that well-penned essay, that's not the easiest thing to do. And this was really the first time in his 29 years on the earth that he was starting to feel comfortable about opening up about these things. So maybe it needed to come to a head in that team setting in order for it to get out.
What have you heard from inside the team today? Have you reached out to Kevin? I know you texted with Ty Lue today.
Yeah, I reached out to both Kevin and Ty Lue, and quite frankly, Ty hadn't seen the essay yet this morning when I texted about him, and he's had a chance to read it and reach out to Kevin, and Kevin literally it was a brief, appreciate what you wrote, and exchange some words back and forth from there, but. Again, this is not a shock to the team. This is something that the team is aware of. I think what the team will be processing will be how can they support him now that it's a public issue. And they've had Cavs teammates go through this in the past. Channing Frye lost both his parents last year. Yeah. He wrote an essay about the depression he went through. DeMar DeRozan, now the Toronto Raptors, obviously seemed to be the person that inspired Kevin to tell his story as well. So, perhaps Cavs personnel can reach out to Raptors personnel to see how they're supporting DeMar as he goes through this process as well in the public sector.
Perfect segue for me, David. Thank you very much. Travel safely. You're on your way to Denver. Dave McMenamin. The issue of mental health and athletes and the public discussion of the same. That's a topic that my colleague Kate Fagan has spent a great deal of time reporting in her current book, What Made Matty Rum? The Secret Struggles and Tragic Death of an All-American Teen. It's the story of an Ivy League freshman, a track athlete who committed suicide. Kate is here. I'm sure this brings a lot of echoes from your own reporting on this. What do you make of what Dave's told you? And I know you've read the piece today of this entire story.
Yeah, my initial reaction was really one of relief that Kevin Love is continuing to open up this conversation. He even mentions in that piece that the culture within basketball in this case had a lot of powerful athletes that were unwilling to really talk about the feelings that they were having either mentally or emotionally. And in my reporting in the book and even traveling around to athletic departments, this is the reality that you see within Division I athletic departments down to Division III within high school athletic departments, athletes that are unwilling to be the first to say, hey, is this harder than you think? What might be going on in addition to what's happening on the court and on the field? But when you have an athlete like Kevin Love being willing to step up and say, this is something I experienced, I think you're going to see the trickle-down effect that college athletes and high school athletes might be empowered to be the first within their communities to say, hey, let's talk about some of this stuff a little bit more.
Now, an NBA athlete is a support network, he and his union and his team and his league, certainly. So Kevin has that. He's seeing a private therapist, but certainly he has that support. But if you're a college or a high school athlete and you feel that things are slipping in a bad direction, those resources may not necessarily be right there for you.
Yeah, I mean, that is a big issue facing, let's look at Division I athletic departments. Too few of them actually have in-house mental health professionals within the athletic department. They're still relying on the college counseling centers on the campus, which they themselves are already strapped just dealing with the general population students. And so there's a lot of resources that need to be directed toward athletic departments when it comes to dealing with these issues and trickle down all the way to the high school. And there's even fewer resources for those kinds of athletes. So, but it is a conversation that over the last year and with stories like Kevin Love's and DeMar DeRozan's last week that college athletic departments are starting to say to themselves, we have to take this very seriously going forward.
You know, the stigma for the athletes fighting through that, the courage to speak out, and we saw that today with Kevin Love. Kate Fagan, always a joy to speak with you. Thank you so much. Appreciate it.
Thanks.
Now, players' rights and players' attitudes in college basketball. We have never seen a march like this in the sport, where the prospect, the necessity of major change seems to grow day by day. As the trek begins towards this year's champion, the questions are rampant in light of that recent federal indictment. The questions of what players deserve from the $20 billion television pie. There's also the growing chance of a major change in the NCAA transfer rule, possibly to allow players to change schools without having to sit out a year in the process. That led a veteran coach to unload on that prospect in terms that are resonating throughout the sport.
I've been in this business a long time. Never seen like we had over 800 Division I players transfer last year. Over 800. Come on. Teach them how to quit. That's what we're doing. Things not going well, let's quit.
Orlando Tubby Smith either striking a blow for truth or telling the modern athlete to get off his lawn. Now, the first rejoinder to Tubby's points about player attitudes is to point out his own head coaching career. 4 years in Tulsa, just 2 seasons in Georgia, very successful, leaving for Kentucky, where he won a championship in his first year, eventually forced to leave there, to Minnesota, thence to Texas Tech, and now in Memphis. Now, that's an adult's career driven by all the pressures and the priorities that go with that. Smith in the modern digital race to control the message off the original comments today on ESPN Radio with Golick and Wingo. He did not shy from the Q word, but drew a distinction about how he used it.
I never said quit. I said it teaches you to, it makes it easier to leave. When I was growing up in a household, my dad told me to finish that chore. You better not quit in the middle of the road doing your chore. You better get it completed, and you better finish it. And that's my whole thing. Just finish what you start.
So there's Tubby's use of the Q word and what the reaction to liberalizing the transfer rule might represent. Clinton Yates of the Undefeated. It's always good to talk with him. He's parsing the usages of the word, but he's not backing away from the quit word.
I don't like this at all. It's so very disappointingly disingenuous because all it does is it exposes what is most important to a lot of people who are taught to lead children, which is the power dynamic. If you're more concerned about whether or not you could control where a kid should be rather than just letting them play or be happy as student athletes, you have a huge problem. I'm here in Lexington. I'm going to relay a quick story. I know it's not the same, but I was talking to a young man who played college baseball. He went to a D1 school, ended up getting redshirted, couldn't play, transferred out, went to a JUCO, almost quit playing the game that he loved of his life until he got another chance to get back to another school and end up playing. And overall, what message are you sending if you don't want to allow kids to move freely among schools? Do you want them to play? Do you want them to grow as human beings, as athletes? Or do you want them to just be a part of the system that makes you so much money? Transferring freely is what should be done because it makes the most sense for the health of the human being, never mind the school or the coach.
It's also market forces. To what sense do you think this is seen as a threat to coaches whose lifeblood is their recruiting?
I would say it's a huge threat, and Tubby obviously has been personally affected a lot, which is the reason why he went off in that press conference. But let's be real. The athletes are the reason why these guys make so much money to begin with. So if you put forth this, this notion that somehow you deserve to be more in control of their lives than they deserve to be, that's a very scary thought if you're a recruit going to play for somebody like him. And if you're already on that roster, I'm a little bit concerned as to whether or not Tubby Smith actually cares about my future versus his own.
If you listen real carefully, those are tectonic plates that seem to be shifting. Now, we can sit here and jump ugly on the NCAA. It's a convenient piñata. Everybody does it. It takes no intellect to do that. But have you ever seen a moment where it seems like everybody agrees? Yesterday, we talked about what the NBA is doing in terms of trying to deal directly with high school kids. Have you ever seen a moment where it seems like everybody knows something is about to happen, but nobody knows exactly what?
I haven't, and that's why this is refreshing, but at the same time, as I mentioned before, so disappointing from Tubby. Stories about what your dad told you in the 60s and the 70s are just not relevant to the realities of today. I understand what the concept of commitment is, but the point is these kids are committing to themselves, which is ultimately what is most important here if you actually care about the development of a young person in total.
Where is this headed in a tangible sense? Let's step back to 30,000 feet here. If coaches see it as a threat, if everyone says there's change in the air, I mean, you can sit down and do the math and say, well, you can cut that TV pie up, but there's really not enough money to go around. Coaches will have to take pay cuts. Where do you see us in 5 years?
I see this close to something that Ed O'Bannon has obviously fought for years and something Steve Kerr mentioned a while back, which is that you don't have to necessarily pay players. You just have to not, disallow them from making money. If they are the ones that are bringing in all this money, if their likeness is what is actually getting these schools and all these other endorsement deals paid, give them a chunk. It's who they are. It is themselves who are actually doing the work. That is where I see this going in the most recent future, the nearest future. Down the line, whether or not you work out some sort of a system to pay people in terms of what happens, I don't know. But look, if a kid does the work, the kid should get to be paid.
Give Coach Smith credit. He said it on Sunday, stands by it essentially on Tuesday. Clinton, always a joy. Thank you so much. Travel safely. Appreciate it.
No problem, Bob.
And next up, I will speak live with the NFL receiver who says the medical care he got in college had one goal: get him back on the field as soon as possible.
I just saved hundreds of dollars by switching to Geico. I feel like I'm on top of the world.
Disclaimer, you will not be transported to the top of the world. In the unlikely event you find yourself at the Arctic Circle, seek shelter from the elements immediately to avoid frostbite and or hypothermia. Geico will not be responsible if you find yourself in a cave or crevasse with a lonely abominable snowman, who in all likelihood will force you to play games including but not limited to Go Fish, charades, Chinese checkers, or his personal favorite, Red Rover, send Yeti on over. Geico is not liable for any damages, either physical or emotional.
Geico. 15 minutes could save you 15% or more.
And some more stuff that matters. The clock is ticking. Less than 3 hours until the NFL's franchise and transition tag deadline. Biggest name expecting to be tagged is Le'Veon Bell, who does not expect an agreement with Pittsburgh prior to the 4 o'clock deadline. It would be the second straight tag for Bell, who told ESPN he will not play for less than $14.5 million next year. Longtime NFL referees Ed Hockley and Jeff Triplett are retiring. That's according to a tweet from Al Riveron, the head of NFL officiating. Hockley, nicknamed the Gun Show for those bulging biceps, worked as an NFL official since 1990. He is an attorney. Triplett with the league since 96. And between them, the two gentlemen refereed 3 Super Bowls. Speed up baseball. Oh, they're bringing it back. The Diamondbacks can do their part. The bullpen car is coming back. First time in the big since 95. Relievers can eschew the walk. They can instead choose to ride in one of the pair of custom golf carts adorned with a decorative helmet that will drive Arizona's warning track.
Your redshirt freshman quarterback, everybody in the house is thinking they're not going to throw with this guy deep in his own end zone. They go play action. Listenby, the track All-American, runs right by Jordan Thomas.
Colby Listenby, Whiteout, Texas Christian University, a 6th-round NFL draft pick 2 years ago. He's been on 3 NFL team rosters, currently signed to the Colts, and he's never played an NFL regular season down. His career dogged by injuries. Listenby alleges in a lawsuit against TCU, its coaches and its doctors, that the medical care he received at the school and the pressure to treat and clear players to return damaged his health and his professional prospects. Sunday, TCU coach Gary Patterson broke his silence about the allegations involving his leadership and the care given his players.
Without really talking about it, I guess I was a little bit hurt because, 36 years, I'm one of those coaches that put everything in my life into kids, growing them up, giving them an opportunity. College's jobs is not to make the NFL. Our job is to prepare them for it so they have an opportunity.
And joining us today, Colby Listenby, and he is accompanied by his attorney, Derek Potts. Gentlemen, it's good to have you here. Colby, can you specifically tell me what was wrong with the medical care that you received at TCU?
Well, I got injured, and I had a few things that they were saying to me. I was faking that other teammates had worse injuries than mine. I was getting injected with cortisone and then numbing shots to play every game, things like that.
What do you allege in your suit happened to you at your final college game, the Alamo Bowl?
So I came into practice for the bowl game already injured. And then I got the pregame shots as usual, and I was still injured during the first half of the game. And then they gave me 5 shots, so it gave me 2 in the middle, 1 above my area, 1 a blocking shot, and then 2 on the left side, 1 on the right side. It hit one of my nerves, and my whole entire right leg went numb. So I couldn't finish the game.
You allege you essentially were paralyzed by a shot that hit, the femoral artery?
Yeah, I believe so, yes, sir.
What was the attitude that you say existed from the coaching staff and medical staff about returning players to action?
You said the attitude?
Yeah, the attitude. How was it expressed and what was it?
It was very aggressive. Like, I'd be in a receiver meeting room and stuff, and we watching film. Coach P come in there and like start like yelling and start getting mad and cursing at us and just like threatening, you know what I'm saying things like if you lost, it was a Texas game. He said if you lost to Texas because I wasn't playing, that wouldn't be allowed back to TCU in the future.
Yeah, we invited the university to be part of this program today. They've provided a statement, which I'm going to read from in just a second. They also pointed us towards some materials in the public record to express what they say is the other side of it. Now, the statement is from the athletic director, Jeremiah Donati, and it says, in part, we were saddened and disappointed to learn that Colby Listenby decided to pursue a lawsuit against TCU and many others. We were shocked by his course of actions. We take tremendous pride in our long-standing tradition of excellence in providing a positive experience for our student athletes, especially in the areas of prevention, care, and rehabilitation of athletic injuries, end quote. They also pointed our attention to an interview you gave on the field during your pro day back in 2016. Let's listen to that.
Now, looking back here on your career at TCU, what does this school and this program mean to you?
It means a lot. It helps me, for sure, help me get to where I am now. Coaching staff, medical staff, just to support like all the fans and everything.
So, Colby, if you're suing the medical staff and the coaching staff, why on your pro day would you speak so generously of them then?
I mean, that was a month after my combine, so it was pro day. And, I mean, I didn't know the extent of my injury at the time, really. I didn't know I was going to have a metal plate in my pelvis. And I didn't have a problem with every coach that was there. It just had a problem with a select few. So.
And as you know, Bob, he has a steel plate in his pelvis. I think he's the only NFL player in history to have such a plate.
Where's your career right now, Colby? Tell me about it.
Bounced around. I got drafted by the Buffalo Bills, went to the Dolphins all season, then now I signed a future deal for the Colts.
Are you 100% right now?
I'm currently still working out and trying to make myself better for a chance for next year.
All right. Well, we appreciate your being with us today. Colby Listenby, bringing suit, and his attorney, Derek Potts. Gentlemen, thank you for being with us. We appreciate it. And a final word on this day from Studio Z. I'll be right back. Tonight, West Coast Conference Championship week continues. BYU and the Zags. That is at 9 p.m. Eastern Time. Set your clock. Tonight, Sports Center with Michael. Tag deadline, all the reaction from around the league. Carmelo's transformation, and a look at the 8 teams. I'm sure they talked to Joe Lunardi about this. The 8 teams to make the brackets with the real chance to be champions at the end of the rainbow. We will see tomorrow. We will take you to the Darko side, believe it or not. Next up, NFL Live. Knicks is next. I'll see you tomorrow. Outside the Lines.